So, hello, thanks for joining the community meeting of Kiali. This is Sprint 83. We are going to release version 1.62. So let's start directly with the agenda. This is the agenda. It's the typical agenda. The only added point is some end of year logistics, and we will follow with the Sprint 83 summary, and then we will follow with Kiali 1.61 highlights, and then we will have a preview of the following two sprints. And finally, we will have our usual community discussion. So about the end of year logistics, it's mainly dates that I'm going to show. The next sprint, the sprint 84, is going to run between December 19, starting this Monday, and will end on January 6th. In that sprint, we expect to have a release which is going to be Kiali 1.62 and we expect to generate it on January the 9th. There will be no community meeting. That community meeting is cancelled. I used to give some background about the reason for that is because, on the whole life of the Kiali project is been the norm. Several of the maintainers of the Kiali project take a break in the last week of December, and some people is also taking a little longer. So we expect that the next release is going to be quite light in terms of fixes and features. So probably we won't have a lot to present for the following version. So that's the reason of canceling the community meeting. Probably nothing to really, not a lot to show really. We will restart with the community meetings in the next one, which is going to be the Sprint 85. That one is going to run between January the 9th and January the 27th. Again, we expect to release Kiali 1.63 on January 13th, and then we will resume with the usual community meetings on January 17th. Please join us if you are interested in listening the latest features of Kiali. This sprint demo is going to be the last one of the year. So, happy holidays to people who celebrate something. So having said this, let's go directly to the highlights to the Sprint 83 summary. So in total, I think that if I remember correctly, we have about 51 issues. And by issues, I mean between pull requests and open tickets from community or from maintainers. So it's mixed. In the main Kiali repository, for the whole sprint, we managed to close 20 issues. 5 are still in progress, 6 are in the backlog, 2 are still in review, and we have 3 epics in progress currently. Remember, epics are longer-term efforts that may span multiple sprints. And, well, the rest of the repositories are just a small amount of pull requests and issues in those ones. So let's go to the highlights of this sprint and the upcoming release. So this one is related to the Gateway API, if I remember correctly. I will pass the microphone to Heik, who was in charge of doing this.
Thank you, Edgar. Yeah, in Kubernetes Gateway API integration, which you have in Kiali, we have a wizard in services to create the routing using the Gateway API. And in this routing wizard, a new tab was added, which is about routing filters. I can share my screen and show which kind of filters there can be added.
Yes. Go ahead.
So
You can share.
yeah, so if you check any service, for instance from Bookinfo, then create as we had this functionality, create gateway API routing, and in the route filter, this route filter tab was added. Currently it comes with two filters. The request header modifier with set, add, remove headers. For instance, we can add this filter, can add the route preview, and this filter appears here and it can be created. Also, we can add a request redirect filter, and currently a gateway API on Istio side is supporting HTTP and HTTPS protocols, and yeah, let me add the host name. So and this hard-coded 301 and 302 other response codes. So those are the supported ones. So it will create a HTTP route with these configurations. So yeah, currently only these two filters are added, and the rest of the filters are work in progress. I will stop sharing. Thank you, Edgar. That was all from my side.
Thanks, Heik. So let's move to the next slide. This one is about a work, something that is still in progress, and it's about working with no Istiod access. Perhaps can you comment on that, Yosune?
Sure, thanks, Edgar. So we are working in a feature for Kiali to work with no access to Istiod. And there are a couple of scenarios where this can be important. One of them is if we want that Kiali work with other service mesh solutions that are not exposing Istiod. And the other reason is to support different deployment models when, for example, the control plane is deployed outside the mesh and we are not going to have any kind of access to Istiod. And in order to support this, we are adding a new configuration item that is going to be Istio API enabled. That is going to be true by default, but it should be turned off in order to just work in this in this way. And we will see some change in the Kiali application that most of them are already defined, but some of them are still in discussion. And if you want to see further details, you can jump into the GitHub issue and have a look. And one of the things is that the control plane metrics are not going to be available. And this is something that we can see in the Istio system control plane card. Some of the details are going to still be available, like, for example, the canary status. But, for example, the metrics are not going to be available. And another thing is, like, we are going to see another label that indicate us that the API is disabled. as this is going to affect some other parts of the application. Another thing is that we are not going to be able to see the proxy status in the workload details view. And this is because this information is a logic that has the Istiod, and even if we have access to the sidecar, the sidecar is not going to provide us that information. So for the moment, it's not going to be available. Probably we are going to be displaying an unknown status that will show us that the sidecar is there for the pod, but that we don't know the status. Another feature is that the namespaces list at the moment is obtained using the Istio case. So we are calling the Istio to obtain that information. But if we don't have access to Istiod, now we are going to call directly to the Kubernetes API. So this will probably affect a little bit the performance. Another thing is that the Istio configurations probably will be in this is still under some investigation because it can see that we can create or update, but recent investigations has shown that when we are trying to create an Istio configuration, even if we use the Kube API, Istio creates a validations webhook, and this is going to make the configurations fail when we try to create or update. So probably they could be in read mode, but this is still not decided completely at the moment. And the last thing is that when we see the services list, now we are getting the service list from the Kube API, but also we are obtaining the Istio registry services. And this is something that we are not going to be able to see because the Istio registry is not going to be available. So these are the main issues or the main changes in the application. And as soon as this will be released, we also will update the documentation showing all the changes that we have. And that's it. Thanks, Edgar.
Yes, thank you, Yosune. So let's go to the next slide, which is going to be about multi-cluster support in Kiali. And this is a new proposal. I think that if I remember correctly, we already had some experimental support in Kiali. And we are starting a new effort for adding proper support for multi-cluster. Nick can comment the details about this effort. So let's pass the mic to Nick. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Edgar. Yeah, like you said, there's been some discussions around this in the past, and it's a very large feature. People have a lot of different requirements when it comes to multi-cluster. So this is a proposal to add support for multi-cluster in Kiali, or to increase support, I guess is what you could say. And it's just that. So we're looking for community feedback and for people to comment on this and describe their use cases, and if this proposal would meet their use cases. People could read this and give that feedback. That would be really helpful and would help shape the direction of multi-cluster for Kiali. I can go over some of the high-level details. There's a link that you see right there where you can go read the proposal and comment on GitHub. But at a high level, Kiali will connect to each one of the Kubernetes clusters that's a part of your mesh, and then Kiali will assume that your observability signals, such as metrics and traces, are in a centralized location. And that's kind of the trade-offs that we're going to make, at least with this initial stab at getting greater multi-cluster support. And the authentication scheme that we're going to focus on is OIDC, because that works out of the box long as you've configured it properly with multi-cluster. So those are the high-level details, but again, follow the link to the proposal and please comment. We'd love to hear your feedback and requirements on this. But do you have anything to add, Edgar?
No, it's mostly what you said. I mean, just to, I mean, it's open. This proposal is open for community feedback, as you said. I think that is. I just wanted to reiterate on it. But it's all fine. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. This is just a list about some fixes, some small fixes and enhancements. The first one is related to security hardening, if that's the right word, which is about making the service account having read-only privileges by default. In the past, we were giving some write privileges to the Kiali service account, but for most authentication strategies, it wasn't required. So this is just to go a little bit into the minimal privileges principle. So it's only happening for when you are using a strategy that other than anonymous. In the last release, that's just going to the second point. In the last release, we had a small issue in the distro container, which is, if I remember correctly, is now the default container that you will get when installing Kiali. And the problem with the last release was that Kiali wasn't able to do HTTP connections that were using SSL or TLS. That's because the root certificate store is empty in the distro container, so that will be fixed for this version. The third point is about a deprecation. We are deprecating the implicit flow of OpenID. It's not going to be anymore supported. In this sprint, we had to do a small fix, specifically that was affecting that flow. It was doing a redirection loop if the OpenID provider was calling back with some kind of error message. So that was fixed, but I mean, we are deprecating it as of Kiali 1.60, and we expect to completely remove the implicit flow support in some following release. If I remember correctly, it was mentioned that probably it is going to be removed in 1.63, so that should give you about 1.5 months more or less to switch to the authorization code flow that is going to be the only supported flow for this authentication strategy. The next one was a bug fix, where Kiali was showing the missing sidecar icon or badge in lists, workload lists, and application list pages when there was some ingress or egress gateways in a namespace that it wasn't the Istio system namespace. So that was fixed, and you no longer should get that icon in Kiali. And finally, for people who is using OpenShift, we added the capability to configure timeouts. That's mainly for the authentication handshake, if that's the right word. So when you are logging in, OpenShift was expected to reply quite quickly. But for some environments where OpenShift is being a little slower than the expected amount of time, some people started having problems. And well, those timeouts were hard-coded and now they are configurable. And basically, that's the list of the enhancements that we had. Let's go to the preview of the next 2 sprints. I mean, we are doing the mention next 2 sprints because we won't have a community meeting in the following sprint. So there are several issues in progress. It's mainly the epics, which are long-term or longer efforts. You can see that we have the multi-cluster effort there that Nick just mentioned. We also have the support for Istio Gateway API, which is a longer, which I mean requires several changes in Kiali to fully support the Gateway API. There is the pattern fry topology for Kiali Graph. We are trying to see if we can start using the pattern fry topology or the control that the pattern fry framework has bundled in instead of using Cytoscape. We are just evaluating it, so we don't expect that Cytoscape is going to be changed anytime soon, or at least don't expect that we do changes in the graph the following releases. And well, there is also the epic about mesh weight settings. I don't remember the details of that, but I mean that's also in progress. For the next 2 sprints we have in backlog, which are shorter term issues. There is the point about ambient mesh. Well, that's not really a short-term issue, but I mean we are still investigating about what changes need to be done in Kiali for supporting ambient mesh, which is something pretty new, and it's on our radar for working on. The second one is still related to the Gateway API, and well, you can see we have several things here. The editable Istio config annotation for workloads and services. I don't remember also the details of that one, but well, it's something that is on the backlog. Well, the next one, if I remember correctly, is just something to explore because it's something more or less, it's a Istio feature that lets you use some stats in the telemetry. So that's there in the backlog. And we also have something related to multi-cluster, which is using the cache for workload-only services. We are looking forward to making the cache mandatory as part of the multi-cluster effort. So you will no longer be able to opt out of or turn off the Kiali cache. So that point is related to that. And finally, the last one, the 6th in the backlog is, if I remember correctly, is an ongoing issue that is going to be fixed in the next sprint. This is how it's looking, the work that we have in the backlog, and that's it mainly, if I remember correctly. So thank you for joining us. We will go to the community meeting, and I will stop the recording now.